Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today, especially those who are on your summer break. We really appreciate you being here. Welcome to the Indiana IEP Resource Center series, Conversation with Authors. My name is Marcy Wilburn, and I'm the project coordinator with the center. We are very excited to welcome both Carl Glickman and Rebecca West Burns, author of Leadership for Learning, How to Bring Out the Best in Every Teacher. We want to start with some logistics, as always. Please know that all microphones have been muted and all webcams are disabled for participants. Throughout the session, we encourage you to post general comments within the chat box. The chat box is available for all participants to view. However, in order to do that, there's a drop down that says to, and you need to select two panelists and attendees. If you just select panelists, the only people that see it are both Carl, Rebecca, myself, and Jolly. If you want to pose questions throughout the session, please do so in the Q&A, and questions will be answered throughout. In order to access the chat box in the Q&A, click on the toolbar at the bottom of the screen, type your comment and or question, and simply click send. Today's session will be captioned, so if that's your preference to enable the captions, click on the closed captioning button in the lower toolbar. If you have any technical difficulties today, please contact Mark Suter and I will add his email into the chat box. At the end of the session, one lucky participant will be selected to receive a copy of the book. Please stay tuned at the end of the session and we'll announce the lucky winner. And in case you aren't the winner today, you might want to get a pencil or pen out because all individuals have the opportunity to purchase the book at a 20% discount using the code. All right, are you ready for it? Capital G, capital B, capital R, capital C, 21. So GBRC21, and you can use that on the ASCD website to purchase the book at a discount both today and tomorrow, if that's of interest to you. And thank you, Angie, for adding that to the chat box for me. At this time, I will pass it over to both Carl and Rebecca to start the conversation about their book. Thank you both. Welcome.
Thanks, Marcy. We're so excited to be here. We really appreciate you having us today. So hello, everyone. In Indiana, again, we're so excited. Carl and I are looking forward to talking with you about our book, Leadership for Learning, How to Bring Out the Best in Every Teacher. I'm coming to you from Florida. Carl's coming to you from Vermont, and I'm going to let him kick it off. He did pre-record his because he was a little concerned about the internet just in case. So I'm going to start his introduction to you all using a pre-recorded message.
I pre-recorded this brief introduction because I'm in Vermont and I was concerned in the mountains that we might not get a really clear connection. So the background of this book is in 1981, I wrote a book called Developmental Supervision, Alternative Approaches to Helping Teachers Improve Instruction. And it was based on my experience as a school principal where I couldn't understand why teachers reacted differently to me when I used the same approach in observing them and then conferencing with them and setting up future plans for improvement. Some teachers found the way I interacted with them is very helpful. Some teachers thought I was just wasting their time because they knew more about their teaching and what was going on in the classroom than I did, which is probably true. And other teachers just wanted me to just tell them what to do because they just wanted me to tell what I thought about what they were doing, what I had observed, and then give them clear directions as to how they should work in the future. Later on, when I had the advantage of being at a university and doing some studies, I tried to unpack this whole thing about how do people react differently to different approaches. And what I found was there was four approaches that can be used in working one-to-one with teachers or working even with groups of teachers. And one approach is you can be non-directive, where you actually facilitate the thinking of the other person. The second approach is being collaborative, where you share what you've observed and then you discuss what are some possibilities from both of you, and then you come up with a mutual plan. Then there's directive informational, which is you lay out what the suggestions of changes that should be made, and you ask the teacher to choose from those. That's a directive informational approach. Or directive control is when you're dealing with a teacher who's really struggling and really is leaning on any type of help. And that's being directive controlling, which is telling them very specifically what they need to do in order to continue on and survive in their classrooms. So I finished that. Later on, we started looking at different formats and structures, ranging all from peer coaching to clinical supervision to critical friends groups, et cetera, et cetera. And then we also started looking at interpersonal behaviors and technical skills that are all sort of a bundle. And about, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I came across the work that Rebecca West Burns had done, which had taken my previous studies and put a whole different and new dimension to them in terms of teachable moments, and also in terms of what are some other technical skills and also interpersonal behaviors. So I got in touch with Rebecca and I said, Rebecca, would you be willing to work with me on a new book? And she graciously agreed, and we didn't know each other particularly well, but we certainly respected each other's work. Mm-hmm. And the outcome is this book. And it's what I call a one-stop shop, is that we try to encompass as much information in a very short book and a very practical book about what you can do starting in the fall with whatever role you're in, whether it's department head or principal or mentor or coach or grade level chair, that you can use and you can discuss with other faculty and staff and move your entire school, classrooms and across classrooms, into a very supportive and growth-inducing environment that improves upon what you were before. I want to thank you all for the year that you've had and that you stayed with. It's been extraordinary, and I really appreciate it, as we all do. Now I shall turn this to Rebecca.
Thanks, Carl, for that introduction. As Carl said, I'm so honored. I remember the day he did call me and asked me to work with him, and it's just been a pleasure every day since. I have admired his work for a long time. And so what we have here is the second edition of his first best-selling book, Leadership for Learning, that was published by ASCD. And what we're going to do today is just have a pretty informal conversation and share with you just things that we really love about the book and provide you with an overview. And then talk a little bit about ways we think, how you might be able to use it as you're starting to think about next year. I know this time of year, principals might be getting new assignments, or I know the year just ended, but often it's a time for reflection and thinking about, okay, well, what do I want to do differently next year? How do I want to make some changes, work with teachers differently, and really move forward towards continuous improvement. So what we have on the screen right now are what we think are just some of the golden nuggets. That's what we're calling them. And so really, these are the reasons we love this book. We've put in here some personal reflection tools. There's a lot of times we spend asking you to think about yourself and reflect on your own leadership and just be a little metacognitive about what you are doing. We also provide some scenarios and vignettes to help bring those concepts to life so that you can kind of see how these concepts come through as you're reading them. And we put different people and different roles, leadership roles, sometimes a principal, sometimes a coach, sometimes a teacher leader, so that we can show how these concepts transcend different roles. We also have included some tables and charts, and we've updated them, and you see 3 on your screen right now, where we have different ways to illustrate language or different ways to help these concepts come to life and how you can make sense and use them to work with teachers. And then we've also added what you see on the far left are some decision-making flowcharts. I know when I started reading Carl's work, I really became fascinated with, okay, well, how do you decide when to use a directive control approach? Or how do I decide when to be non-directive? And so as I started thinking about these concepts that Carl had laid down for us, I started really thinking about, okay, how does one make those decisions? And that's how these flowcharts came to be. So these are a few of just the things that we love about this book. If you can, if you want to take your camera, there is a QR code in the upper right-hand part of the screen. If you do have the videos of us in front, you can simply grab those with your mouse and slide them to the side, and then you can take your camera, and if you hold your iPhone up or your camera feature up to that QR code, it should pop up a link for you that takes you to the book on ASCD's website. And on there, you can actually find more information. There's a free study guide. There's some access to a couple of the chapters on there. So feel free to use that QR code and go explore while we're talking today. The book is really divided up into 7 chapters, and we have included some appendices, and we've included the table of contents for you here. We're going to walk you through the table of contents and give you just a couple highlights of each part. We start off the book by, again, looking inward and talking about just the nature of teaching and learning, and really the importance of reflection, and how not only do teachers need to be reflective, but also we as leaders need to look inward and continually reflect on our own practice. And then we move to chapter 2, where we provide some highlights of some structures for professional learning. We talk about peer coaching, we talk about teacher inquiry, we talk about clinical supervision, we talk about co-teaching, we talk about different ways that you can use these strategies in your school to have teachers work with one another to improve practice. And then we move to chapter 3, well, actually chapters 3, 4, and 6 are really highlighting skills that leaders can use when they want to work with teachers and help them improve their practice. So chapter 3 really hones in on those skills when you're having conversations with teachers about observing practice. So how do you, what are the skills needed to conduct an observation, to engage in a pre-conference, to engage in a post-conference? What are the skills needed to deal with assessing and evaluating instruction, which are slightly different from actually the coaching piece? So we really tease out those different skills in chapter 3, and also the nuances between coaching and evaluating. And then in chapter 4, we move more towards what Carl was talking about with how do we talk with teachers? So not talking to them, but how do we really engage with teachers? And what are the different skills needed to do that? Carl has in there from his original work all these different continuum really of skills that you can use, and then you can actually chart your language to figure out, okay, well, which approach am I using when I work with teachers? Or if I want to use this approach, how might I use clarifying language or summarizing language or redirecting language in order to make sure my approach aligns with what I want to do when I'm working with the teachers. And then chapter 5 takes those skills and actually lays out how do we decide which approach to use when. And it really looks at Carl's work about the developmental nature of teachers and how we can understand where they are cognitively and emotionally and conceptually, and then how do we differentiate our approach to meet their needs? Because in order to bring out the best in them, we have to meet them where they are and then help them go where they want to go on their journey. And then chapter 6 is the new nugget that really comes in here, which is the work that I've been doing building on Carl's work. And we were calling these immediate response skills. And so when you think about teaching, you think about teachable moments. We talk with teachers about capitalizing on a moment of instruction with a child to help them learn, or with a student to help them learn. But in chapter 6, what we're really talking about are teachable moments with teachers, and how leaders who are working in classrooms in that moment can use this set of immediate response skills to have a moment of practice become a teachable moment for teacher learning. And so we lay out the different skills of pointing, ignoring, noticing, processing, and we lay them out for you. We define them, we provide examples, and we also provide flow charts to help you think about, okay, what do I do in this moment of practice, and how do I adjust my leadership so that what's happening in the classroom, we can use this as a teachable moment to talk about practice and how to improve it for the future. And then finally, we conclude the book with a topic that who knew when we were writing this would be probably more important than ever, but really the social emotional wellness of teachers. And so how can we as leaders really be thoughtful and intentional and attend to teachers' well-being, which is absolutely imperative, not just, in general, but really right now in this past year and everything that everyone has been through. So that's the highlights. Carl, are there things you'd like to add about the book right now?
I think what I'd like to add is the idea we have a new school year that's coming about, and we've come out of a very difficult time, or we're coming out of a very difficult time. And so in a way, this is a kind of pause, a summer pause about what are we going to be about in our own schools for next year. And in my experience of many, many years as a principal, and then later on as someone who helped develop a network of schools throughout the country, it's really easy to fractionalize what we do in our own schools. In other words, what we do in each classroom, what we do in our grade levels or our departments, and what we're trying to do as a school as a whole. And so we have staff development in one area, we have study groups in another area, we have curriculum committees, we have department level meetings, grade level meetings, we have faculty meetings. And what really frazzles many of us in schools is that we try to do too many things at once in too many separate ways. And what this book tries to get at is the power of doing things focused on our own classrooms and across classrooms, as what do we mean and what do we stand for as a school? I mean, what are our priorities about teaching and learning? What do we want our children to be able to leave our schools being able to know and be able to do? And one way of tightening up the power of a school is how we learn from each other. So what goes on a grade level ahead or in a different subject area, it may appear separate because it's in a different wing of the school or it's different classes, but it's not separate in the educational experiences of the students themselves. And in this book, How to Bring Out the Best in Every Teacher is also about how to bring out the best in every school, within classrooms, across classrooms, how we govern, how we study ourselves. This book then says, okay, we all want to be better at what we're doing, and the only way we can be better at what we're doing is what we learn from each other, what we learn from outside, that really makes school a really powerful experience for our kids. And the book is a focus on the actual practices that help me grow as a teacher, and also help each other grow as a teacher to accomplish what we want to do as a school. So that's what I want to add at this particular moment.
Thanks, Carl. We provided an overview, but what we want to do is really, we want to hear from you all. What questions do you have? We also have included on this slide our email information, as well as I have a Twitter handle. So please feel free to email us after this presentation if you're thinking about it, or if you go purchase the book and you read something and you have a question that you want to discuss with us. We would love to hear from you and hear how you're thinking about these concepts and thinking about how they might translate into your leadership for next year. So we'd like to open it up to questions that you have, or questions from Marcy.
Well, I just posted in the chat, but I was wondering if you had the figures from the Golden Nugget section, maybe on their own slide, if you had those prepped to dive a little deeper into those. At least on my screen, it was kind of hard to see them. And so I didn't know if, I know you had some additional slides, if we could look into the reflection tool and different things that you've utilized when working with teachers.
Sure, we can do that. Marcy also has the PowerPoint, which I think she can share with you all too, so you can see these slides a little more in depth if you'd like to, but I can fast forward here. We probably won't have a chance to go into depth into all of them, but, and we didn't include all of them. I mean, in the book, there are protocols in there. There are quizzes you can take yourself. There are scenarios and vignettes. So we just included a couple here, but what we did include, this first one is that behavior continuum that I had mentioned, that shows all the different interpersonal skills, listening, clarifying, encouraging, and you can examine your own conversations with your teachers and figure out, okay, if I'm using a lot more listening and clarifying and encouraging kinds of statements, then I'm moving more towards collaborative or non-directive. If I'm using more of the directing or the setting parameters or the reinforcing, then I'm moving more towards the leadership-led one and the directive forms of my interactions with teachers. And then we also have this, actually, when we were talking about in chapter 5 about how to meet teachers where they are and understand them developmentally. In the entire chapter, we break all of these down into smaller sections, but then we combine them together so that you can take it. You can look at each of the different ones about where, when I'm working with a teacher, where might they be conceptually? How can I understand if they are a high functioning teacher at this given moment? And how I might adjust my approach to be more collaborative or non-directive, because some of the tensions that arise occur when we have a mismatch between our leadership approach with them and where they are developmentally. Also, I do see some other questions in the chat, so we can look at those as well.
Can I add one more on that developmental checklist? So I know that we have some administrators on, but we also have some teacher leaders on who are mentoring new teachers. Can you give them maybe a tidbit of advice or where to start with these new teachers and how to determine where they're at developmentally?
Sure. So I think as a teacher leader, I can look at this and get a sense of, wow, is this me? Am I having trouble like really thinking through a problem? Am I able to articulate things? I think too, leaders can look at that and really reflect on their interaction with the teacher and try to get a sense there. I will problematize this though, and this chart here and the next one, which is the 4 types of teachers. This is really from Carl's original work, helps you think about where they are developmentally and then how to adjust their level of commitment, where they are with their level of commitment and abstraction, and how to adjust your approach with them. Is to say a word of caution, when you start to think about where a teacher is developmentally, it doesn't mean that they're always there and that they stay in that way. It could be that a given situation has made them be in survival mode. Something personal could be happening in their life that has made them be in survival mode for that time. And therefore, they do need some directive supervision because they can't, right now, this is where they're functioning, but that doesn't mean that they always stay that way. Carl, do you want to add on?
I do. I think the gist of this question is how do we begin, either with beginning teachers or mentoring that we're doing, or even with peer coaching. And the simple advice is right now is the beginning of those meetings should be focused on asking and understanding what the teacher has for their own expectations and how you, meaning the mentor, the coach, the supervisor, what kind of assistance and help for improving my teaching and learning what I want to get from you. So what that does is it opens up this understanding by just listening to someone in their own classroom. And it doesn't just have to be a beginning teacher. It could be a very experienced, wonderful community anchor teacher who is revered, is to get insights into what they are actually concerned about and what kind of curiosity they have and what is it that would be of help and support to them. And then you get some signs. Do they want me to be much more directive? Are they saying, I remember when I first started teaching a large class, I didn't have a clue what to do. I had never taught a class of that size. And if anyone asked me what it is that I need help with, I'd say I need help with everything. I have never taught this class before. Or if I was defensive, I would just say, I'm fine. But saying I'm fine isn't going to help me, and it's not going to help my students. So it's establishing at the very beginning a relationship that in my role in supervising or mentoring or coaching, my role is to help you further your own development of what you want to see kids learn and what would be the support in ways that I can work with you. Now, in saying that, I want to also mention, because I see some of these other questions. Almost everyone in this world thinks they're collaborative, even when they're not. It's the idea of having a window on oneself. So what we mean by being collaborative is that you don't, if you're in a discussion where you're trying to come up with a collaborative improvement with a teacher, you don't begin by telling them what it is I think about what you need to do. You begin with asking them. So in other words, you don't take a domineering role right away to be able to say, okay, well, let's do some problem solving. And these are the kind of things that I think would be helpful. Now, what are some of the things you think will be helpful? By me taking the initiative on what I think is collaborative is not collaborative, because what I'm doing is I'm putting that teacher in the box where they've already heard from me. So true collaboration has anyone who has any hierarchical authority or is regarded in some, and I don't mean this in a negative way, is regarded as some kind of superior expertise. If you want to be truly collaborative, don't you lead at the beginning, you listen at the beginning. And then what will come out of that is this idea in my own hand, do I need to be much more explicit and direct in working with that person? Or do I get blown away about how much this person actually knows about their own teaching and what they're going to do to improve it? So then my job is more is to be non-directive and facilitate that person's own thinking. Or is this person at the stage where they really do have some really good ideas and they're trying some good practices, and I've got some good ideas that I think might help, and then through that we collaborate. So in trying to just summarize this discussion here, whenever we did surveys of anyone in the supervisory role, almost everyone says they're collaborative, but then when we did the surveys of the people being supervised, they didn't see the person as being collaborative. They saw them as thinking they were collaborative, but they were actually much more directive, or they were non-directive. So now I don't know if there's another question that has links to that, because I'm looking at the chat right now and the questions to answer. When I talk about developmental levels, when we talk about developmental levels, I could be experienced. I could have 40 years of experience or 25 years of experience. I could be the most wonderfully regarded teacher in the world. But that doesn't mean that everything that I face, I know how to handle. in the same way I could be a beginning and experienced teacher who's kind of afraid about what's ahead and what kind of help and support am I going to get. But they also might be very, very insightful about what it is that they need to do. So I would never classify a person by how good we think that they are, or how inexperienced they might be. What I always say is a teacher who's teaching a different class than they've taught before is a new teacher again. And when an inexperienced teacher brings to a class that they haven't taught before, but they bring certain experience to it, they might be able to handle that situation better. So developmental simply means the idea of continuing to learn and continuing to grow. And the job of people, of peers and supervisors, is to help figure this thing out together and what it is we're trying to accomplish together. Now, I think I'm going to stop there because I see some other questions being placed up here. And
Carl, I so appreciate that answer, and listening first is so important to form those relationships with people. It's about that 10:30 mark, so we'll close up quickly. I did want to pose one question that I think has a quick answer. Christy put in the chat, she may have missed this, but when you were talking about the survey on collaboration, is that something that you just did, or is that a resource that those listening could utilize or have access to via the resources that you provided at the beginning?
Okay. That has to do with research I did with Ed Paycheck a long time ago, where we did video clips of supervisors and supervisees. And then we came back then with surveys where they analyzed their own behaviors. And what we found in pre and post, when we asked them at the beginning, what kind of approach were they going to be using with this particular teacher, almost everyone said they were going to use a collaborative approach. And then later on, we then interviewed both the supervisor and supervisee. And most of the supervisors still thought that they were being collaborative, but the supervisees did not think that they were being collaborative. They weren't negative about the person, but they just said that those behaviors indicated that the supervisor was in control of what was going to happen and what ideas and practices were going to come out of it.
Thank you for sharing that. The person who posed the question, Christy, just said that surveys just provide so much information, and so she appreciated that. I just want to say thank you both for sharing your expertise with us today. And not only that, but giving a discount code and sharing the additional files that people can access for resources. In a follow-up email, I'd be happy to send that link as well in case you weren't able to capture that. It's just through the ASCD website, so we'll get you that information. And now the time that you've all been waiting for, the big winner of today's book is Shirley Elliott. So Shirley, I will be emailing you to get your mailing address, and we will send you a copy of the book from Rebecca and Carl. Again, thank you so much for everything, and we hope that everyone has a great day. Thanks, Carl and Rebecca.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Of course.